One of my favorite spiritual teachers who inspires me very, very much is Osho. And I feel that he is so misunderstood, particularly ever since there was a documentary called Wild Wild Country, which is about his commune in Oregon that was built and didn't really give him the proper credit of who he is as a person. And it was really hilarious, but it didn't actually explain what sort of a teacher he is. And most people who know him know certain facts about him, like the fact that he had a lot of wealth and he was very controversial in what he said. I wanted to make this video sort of as a tribute to him because he's influenced me so positively with his teachings. I don't believe in ever really putting people on a pedestal, but I do like honoring people and giving them credit where it's due, especially when they're totally misunderstood and not given proper credit. I feel like I want to correct that, or I feel like I would like to do justice to incorrect perceptions of him, because really his teachings are so beautiful and there's so many things that people don't quite understand about who he was as a person. So the first thing that people are very taken aback by is the fact that Osho had 96 Rolls Royces. I think it's absolutely hilarious, and I can see clearly, and many people who truly understand Osho and his teachings understand, they've understood, and they've read and seen what he was trying to accomplish by doing that. But a lot of people are just very instigated by the idea of wealth and the disparity that they couldn't understand. They saw it as such an atrocity. Really, what Osho is trying to do with these 96 Rolls Royces, he said several times, what's someone going to do with that many Rolls Royces? His goal was to get 108, and it's completely facetious and just like a world joke, because that's just how extreme he was and how outrageous and against the status quo, which I admire a lot about his character. He really didn't care. He stood for what he was about. Osho very much was outspoken about the ascetic path and how he didn't believe it was necessary for a person to achieve enlightenment. He thought that fasting was unnecessary, extremities were unnecessary. He wasn't a fan of Gandhi. In Osho's view, you can attain enlightenment through love, through enjoyment, through connection. And so it's completely different than the typically preached ascetic path of renunciation, giving up everything, basically glorifying someone being poor. And so he was like, I'm not a hypocrite, I'm not a worshiper of poverty, and he stood for that. So he wasn't a hypocrite. He believed that people should enjoy wealth, they should enjoy abundance. And I just think that's super admirable that he knew so many people were going to be outraged by his actions, but he did it because he wanted those very people to pay attention, and he was instigating and arousing their response, showing people their own character by their responses to his outrageous wealth. Another thing that's very much misunderstood about Osho is they coined him the sex guru. And as with so many things in Tantra, people are just so shocked by the fact that sexuality is accepted that that's the only thing they fixate on, and they're just like, oh, sex. Just because someone's not demonizing sex, suddenly it means that they're glorifying it and they're obsessed with it. And it's definitely not what Osho stood for. He stood for being open and following nature and being naturally as we are, not being hypocrites, not condemning sexuality, not policing sexuality through marriage. He was very, very open-minded in the sense that he didn't believe that love should be possessive or that sex should be possessive. He wasn't against relationships and connection. He was just advocating that people should truly embody the divine love, the unconditional love, which isn't the human egoic, I need your attention all the time or else I hate you love, or it's not like the patriarchal legal structure of like, we need this contract or else it's not real love. So it was very much kind of like the free love style of the 60s. The third thing that's super misunderstood about him is his commune that was built in Oregon called Rajneeshpuram. Now, I think it's absolutely fascinating that his power is just so immense and so radiant that literally by sitting there, he just manifested this entire community from his followers and the people who loved him. They basically built it, his assistants, all his team administration basically set up this entire city in Oregon. He was such a controversial figure that the people in India could not stand him and they basically kicked him out. Obviously that's going to happen when you have someone who's denouncing the priests and the politicians and all the people in power. It's definitely very instigating. So he started this commune, and if you watch the documentary Wild Wild Country, they completely paint it as this crazy cult. It's such a funny series though. I definitely recommend watching it just kind of for entertainment value. They don't show anything about Osho or his teachings, and they kind of paint it as like some criminal things going on and whatnot. There were some crazy things that happened with some of the members in the city, but I don't feel that Osho directly was responsible for any of that, simply because if you read his teachings and you see what he speaks about and the love that he emits, it's very, very hard to picture that he would be directly responsible for doing anything criminal, like whatever it was that happened. That being said, I know everyone's still human and has their faults, but I think that it would be wrong to vilify him and say that he is guilty of these things when you don't have 100% first-hand witness experience. So the crazy thing about this commune is they say that it was a complete cult. Everyone was wearing orange, and they glorified Osho and they were showing him a lot of attention. So it makes you kind of ponder the word cult and whether it actually was a cult, because if you see the video footage of this quote-unquote cult, these people look extremely ecstatic. They look so happy. It basically looks like they set up their dream city. They had their own rules, you know, like completely free, completely ecstatic. And of course there's going to be negative media, negative press to try and paint anything that's away from mainstream control as, you know, like a cult or like brainwashing mind control. But in my opinion, a cult is only so if you are, you know, forced and pressured and not allowed to come and go, which there's no accounts of anyone saying anything like that. If anything, there's so many accounts of people saying how much that experience changed their lives for the better, how much they spiritually grew, and how powerful of an effect it had on them. The word cult itself is very controversial. Cult is a root of the word culture, and anything that I've seen, usually whenever there's groups and people congregating or people who are thinking differently, it's usually called a cult. And to be fair, it is very easy for groups to degenerate into cults because a lot of times the ego is present and it wants to take over and it wants to assert control and possessiveness and all the ego traits. But I don't see that at all in the case of the Rajneeshpuram and Osho's commune. If anything, it just looked like a radical anarchist sort of rebellion against the state in a way. The fourth thing that makes people really misunderstand Osho's, he was very, very, very outspoken and contradictory in what he said. He was willing to say things that nobody else would, talking about the Pope, for example, and how he's a hypocrite, or talking about how churches and religions are hijacking the true religion, the true spirituality, talking about marriage and how marriage and the family unit enslaves people. The word family comes from famulus, which literally means servant or slave. And these things, of course, whenever you present ideas that are so radical and different, it's going to disturb people. It's going to make them very uncomfortable. And for the person who really can meditate on the words and on the message that he was saying, there's so much appreciation for what he meant, because it's really all an embodiment of so much love for someone who's able to understand what he's saying. He wasn't saying, to tear away families and love and whatever. He was more about understanding that we're all one world family, having children be all raised in the community, having everyone be connected rather than segregated as these self-interested family units. Number 5 thing that a lot of people misunderstand about Osho is his meditation techniques and practices to free the mind. A lot of Osho's practices are based on dance and movement and awakening the Kundalini, and so he adopted a lot of meditations from the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra and created his own sort of interpretation and rendition of it. And a lot of people accuse him of changing the original Tantra and basically creating a false Tantra. But I do not feel that was his intention at all. I feel that he was interpreting the Sanskrit or whatever the message was to be his own creative embodiment, which is technically what we should all be doing, is not taking away from the integrity of the teachings, but allowing it to express through our own individual soul in the way that it comes out. A lot of Osho's practices are very interesting. There's a lot of shaking and movement. I definitely have a lot of fun when I'm leading these Osho-style meditations and workshops. There's something so cathartic and amazing about the energy release. Sometimes there will be exercises where people are yelling and screaming and just shaking and intoning sounds, and it looks very crazy out of context, but really it's complete catharsis and releasing of everything internally in you, where afterwards you just feel this deep sense of peace. And sometimes it takes something radical and crazy to bring out the radical and crazy energy in you that you need to release. So if you're still confused about Osho and you've heard a lot of contradictory things, I highly encourage you to do your own research, read some texts, watch some YouTube lectures of his, and see for yourself what he really stood for and what teachings he shared with people. And of course, it's always important not to worship people or glorify people too much. People are just the messengers. He's just a beautiful vessel for divine teachings, and everyone will have different teachers that they resonate with that bring through that divinity. For me, he's definitely one of those vessels that I admire and appreciate so much for everything that he spoke and that he shared in his time on this planet. Thanks for watching. Follow me on Instagram for more content, join the Facebook group, and subscribe to the channel for more.